Now, certainly, this story has grabbed the headlines in no small way. The country has been buzzing about the talk around the Thabo Bester story, and it's been trending on all fronts, whether it's Thabo Bester, whether it's Dr. Nandipa, all sorts of things trending about this particular story. And now a special task team has been deployed to investigate the escape of the convicted rapist and murderer Thabo Bester from the Mangaung prison in Bloemfontein. And this after the Department of Correctional Services concluded through DNA results that the charred remains that were found in the Mangaung cell were not that of Facebook rapist Thabo Bester. Bester allegedly escaped last year, and this was in May, and it's alleged with the assistance of Correctional Services officials. News website Groundup are the ones who broke the story of not only Bester's escape from prison, but also for running a scam media company from prison under the alias of Tom Mutsepe. So joining us now for more on this is Groundup journalist Marisha Damons. Marisha, thanks so much for being with us here on Morning Live, and welcome.
Good morning, and thank you so much for having me.
So you're one of the journalists who've been working on the story, broke the story, but how did you guys get to know about it?
Yes, so if we take it back to the 3rd of May, when the Department of Correctional Services issued the statement that Thabo Bester had died in a fire that had broken out in his cell, the story sort of died out after that, but in November last year, Groundup started publishing reports after we started noticing certain anomalies in the official version of events, as well as the general delay of the investigation into Thabo Bester's supposed death. And at the time, some of our main questions were how it was possible that an inmate in a maximum security prison was able to set themselves alight, given that the body had been burnt beyond recognition. We also questioned how the Department of Correctional Services was able to so confidently say that it was in fact Thabo Bester who had died in the cell. And we also questioned whether the body that was found had been positively identified as being that of Thabo Bester, whether through DNA testing or through dental records. And at the time, the Department of Correctional Services didn't have any answers for us. But as we began to dig a bit deeper, a prison visit report was actually leaked to us. And part of that report was the autopsy findings of the post-mortem that was performed on this body. And I think that that was the real turning point in this investigation, because those findings showed that the body that was found in the cell was actually dead before the fire had broken out, and that the person died due to head injuries. And just in addition to the autopsy findings, there were also just a host of suspicious circumstances surrounding this fire. We uncovered that shortly before the fire broke out, Thabo Bester was moved to a corner cell. We also uncovered that the CCTV cameras facing towards the exit of the prison were apparently not positioned correctly the morning of the fire. The footage captured from that night also showed two people hastily exiting the prison shortly before the fire had broken out. And yeah, as I said, just a host of suspicious circumstances. And more recently, we published that Thabo Bester had actually been running a media company. He had been paying people salaries, calling the shots, giving out orders, all while being behind bars. And how he was able to do that, we still do not know. And then lastly, what our investigation also uncovered is that in June last year, a prison warder had actually sent an email to the Deputy Justice Ministry letting him know that Thabo Bester had in fact escaped, and that the fire was a cover-up, but that email had gone unanswered. And fast forward to today, it's been confirmed that Thabo Bester has in fact escaped.
So just a quick one on that email that was sent. Who sent it to whom?
Yes, so from our understanding, a prison warder had actually sent an email to the Deputy Minister of Justice, Mr. Patekile Holomisa, and the warder just let him know that Thabo Bester had escaped and that the fire that had broken out in his cell was a cover-up. But that email went unanswered for several months, and the prison warder followed up with Mr. Holomisa again in November. But it appears that nothing has been done since. According to the Justice Ministry, they have been unable to find that email, but they are apparently looking for it. So that's the latest update on this prison warder who had actually sounded the alarm a month after Thabo Bester's supposed death.
So from your perspective, in terms of your investigation, did you actually see evidence of that particular email that was sent?
Yes, so Groundup has actually seen the thread of emails that had been sent from this prison warder to Mr. Holomisa, and we initially questioned whether the emails were being sent to the correct email address, but last year, the individual who had been sending these emails actually did get a response, but it was in relation to prison conditions. So that's how we knew that this was a working email address and that the prison warder had been sending these emails to the correct person. So we had in fact seen the entire thread of emails that this prison warder had been sending to Mr. Holomisa, alerting him that this fire was a cover-up and that Thabo Bester was very much alive.
Marisha, I'm also curious about the timeline of events and what was or wasn't done by the authorities involved. So at which point was the DNA done on the body that was burnt in that cell? And at what stage did correctional services become aware that the body that was burnt beyond recognition was in fact not that of Thabo Bester?
So based on the information that we have received, the autopsy was actually performed on the body the day after the fire had broken out. And when Groundup started investigating this, it had been a couple of months after the fire had broken out. And we actually asked the relevant authorities whether DNA testing had been done to positively identify this body as being that of Thabo Bester. And in November, we were told that the test had still not been completed, but that it was being urgently looked into. Fast forward to 2023, those tests had still not been completed. And as we started publishing more stories with compelling evidence suggesting that Thabo Bester was alive and that he had escaped, we had the spokesperson for the Department of Correctional Services actually say that they had not seen this autopsy report. And just very recently, a few weeks ago, we had Police Minister Bekele confirm that the DNA testing was still not completed. And at this stage, it had been about 10 months since this fire had broken out. So it appears that it's only recently that the authorities actually have had access to the outcomes of that DNA results.
So a lot has since happened. We've also seen reports over the weekend of Thabo Bester apparently, renting a house for his partner and saying that they needed to move to a bigger house about around the time when he was said to have escaped from prison. And all of this happening whilst this man is in prison. You spoke about the media event as well. So how have you been able to piece together how he was able to pull this off? Because during that media event, Tom Motsepe, which is the alias that he goes by in that event, actually makes an appearance. And he's said to be tuning in from London, or New York, was it? From New York. And people actually sang happy birthday to him. How is it that nobody picked up on the fact that he was, in fact, Thabo Bester?
That is also what is so strange to us, starting off with the fact that he was able to run a business and live stream himself into a lavish event at the Hilton Hotel in Sandton, all while being in prison. And this is a maximum security prison. So it's still a mystery to us how he was able to pull that off for so long. But I think with the event that had taken place, unbeknown to the attendees, the person who was presented to them as the chairperson, Tom Motsepe, was actually Thabo Bester, dialing in from New York. And according to the former employees, he was a very persuasive individual, and he had done his research, and apparently well-connected media people or people in the media industry knew of him. And I think that just added to his credibility as being Tom Motsepe, which is perhaps why nobody questioned him.
Well, tells you how gullible we are. But what more do we know about Thabo Bester? His family, where does he come from? Who is this guy? What more do we know about him?
So at this stage, we are not entirely sure of his background. I think at most we do know that his biological mother, or the woman who claimed to be his biological mother, tried to claim the body when he allegedly died or supposedly died. But at this stage, there just does not seem to be that much information available of his background, where he's from, and just his general upbringing. So that too, I think, is something that needs to be looked into, because at this point, that is still somewhat of a mystery.
And just finally, Mauricia, what do you make of the Department of Correctional Services now backtracking on their initial statements regarding Bester's escape and death?
So that was actually quite interesting. I think their statement didn't come as a shock to us, because over the last few weeks, we had been publishing compelling evidence suggesting that Thabo Bester had in fact escaped. So I think that their statement coming out now is somewhat of a bittersweet moment, because on the one hand, I guess it is great that the department is finally admitting that Thabo Bester has escaped and that they need to find him. But on the other hand, it is rather worrying that it has taken them almost a year to get to this stage.
Well, we're going to leave it there for the time being, but of course, keep an eye on these developments, because it is a developing story. But thank you so much, Mauricia Damons, who's a journalist at Ground Up and one of the journalists working on the story. And they, of course, were responsible for bringing this one to light and breaking that story around what's actually going on, the shenanigans around Thabo Bester and the escape, the alleged death, the burnt body that didn't belong to him, and so much more. So we'll keep an eye on those developments.